Today, I'm joined by Jules Kuroda, executive and personal coach and author of The Innate Self. Jules has a passion for helping people get past the ideas they have of themselves to unlock more fulfillment. She loves complexity and strives for simplicity and believes the world is more interesting with our paradoxes explored. Her aim is to bring more joy and understanding into the world. Her book, The Innate Self, is for those who are seeking more meaning and purpose in life, or for those who are looking to understand themselves more fully. Jules, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Nadine, it's absolute pleasure on my side, and thank you for having me.
No worries. For those not watching but listening, I encourage you to go check out the video of this because Jules is sitting in front of some palm trees at a beach and looks fabulous.
Well, thank you.
Love it. All right,
Channeling
Jules,
the inner peace. Hmm.
let's kick off by just hearing a little bit about you and yeah, how you got where you are today.
Yeah. So I'm the type of person I talk in my book a little bit about my values, and one of my values is adventure. And so one of the things, if I look at sort of the tapestry of my life, is there's two kind of things that have steered my direction. One is meaning or purpose, and the other is adventure. Like, how can we get there in the funnest way possible? And so I think, if I think through my career has been chapters. I've spent time in nonprofits. I've really loved that work, very heart-centered work. And also wanted to be able to actually help systems more. So that took me back to school, and I got more into kind of the psychological space and understanding organizational systems and design. And so I've worked in corporate spaces. I've done academia for a while because I really care about education. And all of those are just little pieces that have kind of helped inform my view on life and my view on humanity. And I think that is a lot of what kind of made me want to write this book is I see a lot, right now we're living in a very interesting kind of cultural time. And I think coming post-pandemic, people talked a lot about anxiety and depression and loneliness. And one of the things I think is that we are not allowing our whole selves into spaces. And so, how can we have conversations about that more esoteric, deep part of yourself that longs for meaning and joy and wants to be creative, and how can we create framework for that to talk about it, just like we would talk about limiting beliefs, or just like we would talk about emotions that are trapped in our body. And so that's what led me to write The Innate Self.
Cool. Oh, you give us a lot to talk about. You've given us a lot to talk about. Um, I'm really curious about like if we talk about you working in the executive space with and leadership space, like how has that informed your work and some of the topics you include in your book? Has that been a big contributing factor to your work, to your book?
Yeah. So, my long answer to your question would be, I think the thing about being in the corporate space and doing more of the executive coaching, it was sort of the last mile for me on the psychological journey of understanding what people care about. Because I'd worked with people all across different cultures, with different linguistic backgrounds, different belief systems, and I'd see all these themes of just like what it is to be human. Like, we all love to laugh, we all like to have moments that where we can experience connection over things like sunsets. There are these things that we have that are just human. And one of the reasons I didn't think I wanted to get into more corporate spaces is because I thought that that's where you had to kind of leave that part of yourself behind, the part that's deep and that's meaningful and wants to ask those questions. It's all about profit and and that has not been my experience of humans. I think that's the experience I've had of systems, but not people. And I think that's a really important thing to honor and recognize. And it was one of the reasons I decided to write the book is no, people are people everywhere, and we want to to talk about these things and we don't know how to, especially in those more buttoned up spaces where we have to be more logical and don't, I don't know how to expose this part of me, or I don't know how to have a conversation with you as my manager about like, I don't feel like I get to contribute what I have to contribute. And so, how could we create more of a framework to really make it very tangible around like why there's these aspects of ourself that care about the meaning that we have in our days. Like there's micro meaning and there's macro meaning, and all of it matters to us. And people want to talk about that everywhere. So I think the work that I've done with leadership has really been confirming that if you want to talk about how you lead people, you gotta understand what people care about, and you gotta understand where they want to gravitate to. And I think the new generation has so much of this, like just more on the front of their sleeve of like, I want meaningful work. I want to know that I'm contributing to something greater than myself. I want to understand my impact. And but we all have that. Like, who doesn't want to be do meaningful work, right? So how can we talk about that more in jobs?
Have you always felt that for yourself personally, that sense of having meaningful work? Because I feel like for the audience here, like we're kind of at pivotal points in our lives, midlife, that midlife where that really kind of pops up. You've done all the things, you've ticked all the boxes, you've got the career, had the kids, been married, done all the things, and then you kind of get to this point and you go, oh, what is this all about? Did
Mhm.
you have that, or did you have that like pivotal moment in your midlife? Like you don't even look like you're there yet, so maybe not.
I definitely qualify for midlife.
It's a big age range, which I'm kind
It's a
of,
big age range.
starts really early actually, and goes for a
Oh, it's so
long
funny.
time.
It does, it does. No, it's an interesting question. Okay, I want to break it down into a couple pieces. I think so I have always cared a lot about, on a personal level, I've always cared a lot about, how am I spending my time and am I contributing and how am I contributing? And that's always been with me since I think I was itty bitty. I mean, I did like leadership in high school and was, that all that stuff, student council and all of that. But I think that speaking more generally, I think sometimes because we kind of grow up through productive society thinking, which is like, how are you using your time and what value are you adding? And we don't know how to break apart value from like money. And those are different things. And so like the value that you have to offer in life those are the talents and the skills and the space and your presence and your energy and your thoughts, and it's hard to quantify, like we do quantify that with money, but let's not confuse it for whether or not we're successful professionally with do I feel like I'm giving what I have to give? And I think the more for me on going back to a personal lens, like when I started out in academia, it was I cared a lot about helping people learn. Like that's just where I was in my life. Like how do I help people learn? I was very interested. I lived in Japan for a year and I was very interested in what it felt like to be the minority. I grew up in a majority culture. And so I just knew I had no sense of what it is to be other. And I wanted to have that experience. And so I went over internationally. And then I had a real heart for working for people who felt othered when I went back home to America. It was a part of what I wanted to do. And that's a heart thing and a mind thing because I had like the formal training on education and how to do it. But I had the heart piece of I want people to feel understood, and I know a little bit of what it feels like to be misunderstood or misclassified. And so how can we break down some of those assumptions? And I did that for some time, and then I realized like this is great, but I don't feel like I'm getting to use all of my skills, all of my talents. And right, so then it unfolds. And I think as we grow through our lives, like we have to allow ourselves to continue to become we are beings in the making always. And so what fit us in the past, it may not be the right thing for us in the moment, but knowing the things that you have to offer and where you want to contribute and what value you feel like you have. Um, let's not be too limited in that. Like, think about the value you can have in the moment that you're in. So even if it's a meaningless job to you in this moment, doesn't mean that you can't have really incredible impact in one-on-one interactions with people by slowing down and having meaningful conversations. And so it's kind of a reframe, I think, on how we show up and where we put the emphasis as we think about our trajectory and where we're at and how we're ticking those boxes.
Yeah. Okay. The word the word values has popped up a lot. One of the things I love about your book, and I'm only halfway through, is that I'm quite practical as well. I love esoteric, like absolutely love, but I also love practicality. Like, how can we bring these things into our everyday lives? And you've talked about values a lot. And you even mentioned it in your introduction of yourself. One of your values is adventure. So, can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that? Because that's obviously something that you've incorporated into the book and that's really important to you and that you've identified as being really important to people.
Yeah.
And I know you've touched on it a few times, but can you kind of go a little bit deeper into that and like how do we figure it out?
hmm Juicy topic. Okay. So I think about values as being a part of how we sort of define the inner compass that navigates us through situations. It's not going to tell us where to go, but it will help us define how we want to get there and how we handle things and bumps along the way. And I think we all have values. Some of us choose our values, some of us inherit values. Some of us have never cognitively thought about it. They just show up when something's violated. Some people's values are around like justice and fairness. So, and you'll see it when it's like, well, that just doesn't seem right. Or like what you're saying just feels wrong. Like, okay, that may be like an invisible value around justice or equality. Some people's values are really around like kindness, or caring, and it shows up in how we interact with people or how we expect other people to interact with us. And I'll never forget. I was quite young. I was in high school and I had a mentor, and she asked me, what are your values? And I said all the things I thought that sounded good. I was like, I care about integrity and honesty, and she said, what I noticed about that is that humor's not in the mix at all. She said, one of my values is humor. And it was a light bulb moment for me at a very early age. I was probably 16 at the time, that the things that I choose to put emphasis on in terms of what I value will direct the lens I carry in my life. And I think that's why it's so important to me personally, is if I don't choose these things and I just take what's been given to me, like, and we all grow up in cultural contexts and, belief systems or not belief systems, and all of those things have little like fingerprints on us. And if we don't choose the things that we want to guide us through how we live, we can get very lost in the shuffle. So I think of values as these anchors of like, what is it that I care about? How do I want to show up in my life? How do I want to make decisions when things are hard? Who do I want to grow into in the midst of those painful moments or those challenges? And values are their decision-making frameworks almost in terms of how we do it. So I think that's why they're so important.
Yes, yeah, that makes complete sense. How do you determine what your values are? Like, and how do you help someone else? Is that kind of like one of the top things? It's like, all right, what are your values? Is that like one of the first things that you need to cover
Yes.
off on?
Well, I mean, I think when I'm doing like leadership
Mm,
sessions, we always start with values.
okay.
So and you'll know your values by like what matters most to you. So
Mm,
think about a situation in a work context. It's like think about you're in a hard situation and you have to make a decision where it's all gray. Like in one way you're going to be hurting the company, in another way you're going to be hurting a team member, or another way you're going to be hurting a customer. How do you make that decision? What are the things that matter to you? So put a lens on it. This is the practical piece, right? Put a
mm,
lens on what bubbles up for you. And it's a definite like reflection exercise. And there are some different frameworks that you can use to kind of help you mine for those things. But you can also choose like outside in, like I want to have the value of adventure. I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who's reading the book, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that adventure was one of your values." And it totally makes sense to me. And she said, "I wish that adventure was one of my values." And I'm like, well, it
It
can
can
be.
be.
Yeah. But if it's difficult for you, you may have a value that's juxtaposed against it, like security
Mm,
or safety. And so that's also a way in to understanding your values is to flash up the things that you think are terrible or amazing, and what's your emotional reaction to that, and then like what's underneath that. So, but I do think they are values are key to defining the kind of the first pillar of your innate self, as I talk about in the book, is your character. And character and values are so deeply embedded with each other that we to really know who you want to be and to like refine and define who you want to be in life, continuing to wrestle with your values, I think, is a really practical way of assessing if you're on track with yourself and with the sense of ideal self that you may have.
mm. It's quite challenging, actually, isn't it? Or it could be quite challenging because there's that, as you said, the layers of culture, the layers of family conditioning or expectations, and so trying to determine what's important for you
Yeah,
and you in relation to others.
100%.
Yeah, that's kind of could be quite a tangle, really.
No, and I think to the, there's like the to what you're saying, I think this is also why I say like we are beings in the making. Like
Mm,
there are things that will constantly be revealed to us. So, and I had this happen not too long ago. I was in a situation where I needed to drive a lot of conflict, and I was having a very hard time doing it. It was like the role I was being asked to play as a facilitator.
okay.
I was like, what is this? Like, why am I having such a hard time like going directly at the problem? And I realized that in this certain circumstance that I had an invisible value I didn't realize I had, which was harmony.
Uh,
I didn't realize. And so I unpacked that and I'm like, well, I grew up in a big family and I was the oldest, but I'm part of a blended family. And so part of what I feel like I needed to do and navigate was how do I bring these pieces together? And it's not a conscious value. It's a value that's in my being. It's like something that was cultivated in my upbringing. Um, and now that I see it, I can choose to engage in that, or I can say, like, okay, this is a moment I don't want to actually, I need to go against the grain on this kind of inherent value for the sake of another value, which is clarity or, like whatever. But our values have to work. That's why they're powerful too, because sometimes you can use one to help you rein in something else about yourself that you may not love. And so it helps to have something tangible to say, okay, I'm going to work on being more adventurous. I have a value around safety and security. And that's made me maybe a little cautious or a little scared in my life. I want to have this value of adventure. And so I have to say, I'm going to put my adventure in front of my need for security. And that's how we grow bit by bit.
so that's kind of where those paradoxes fit in, right? It's really embracing all of those parts, like whether they be favorable or less favorable. And like, I guess less favorable is probably not the right word because you've identified that it's something that feels uncomfortable, but it's still a part of who you are. So
Yeah.
it's embracing those contradictions, those
Hmm.
paradoxes about ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, speaking about paradoxes, I think one of the things that's very interesting to me is I think we love simplicity. We like to make things black and white. And it's just like it's the way our brains kind of naturally work, but we also have like built it into our societal expectations of how we fit. And so we fall into boxes around ideology and, race and all these things. And we've been pushing the boundaries on a lot of that, I would say, over the last 10 years. And what I love about looking at that as a construct is we are all complex.
Mm,
And if we give ourselves permission to be complex, we can hold two opposing ideas at the same time. And oh my gosh, is that not so much what we need in the world right now? Like we can be both, we can be two things at once that feel conflicting, and both can be true. And I think that like the more we embrace that in ourselves, the more we can embrace that in others.
Yeah, yeah, that's spot on. That's going to take me in a slightly different direction, just off the cuff, like because obviously we want to get into talking about your book and some of the stuff that's in there. But in your book, you do mention social media, and
Yeah.
you've obviously got a bit of a gripe with it, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
I would say
Because
like
I
I
kind of like when I was reading it, I was like, yeah, I fucking know that it's bad. Like it's hang on, my internet. Are you still getting my internet?
yes, I'm still
Yeah,
here.
cool, cool. I thought it dropped
Yeah.
out there. Yeah, I know it's bad, and I feel the discomfort with how it makes me feel sometimes, but it just
Mhm.
just sucks me back in.
I know.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say
Yes.
about that.
This is such a this is such a topic.
Mm,
I would say I'm antisocial in the sense that I am like anti-social media.
okay.
And I myself, Nadine, as I launched the book, my publisher, my publicist, everybody was like, you've got to get a social media. You've got to get on social. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. So I understand the struggle. I
Mm,
understand the struggle with needing like it's a real tool that we use to connect with people and that keeps us connected in ways we otherwise wouldn't be able to. And there's real value in that. Um, for the world, there has been a lot of value that comes from that. But I think it's like anything else. It's a tool. If it becomes the way that we connect with each other, if it becomes the way that we see our lives, if we spend hours and hours sucked into a virtual reality that is not real, what happens to us? Like, what happens to our sense of self? How are we spending our time and our energy? How are we building like the mental model of how our lives compare to other people's lives? It's robbing us of some precious time and it robs us of energy. And I think like to me that is the secret. I made a joke in the book about it should come with a narcissist warning because social media, it just makes you feel less than a lot of
mm,
times. And so there's the need to do more and more to be better.
mm,
And I don't think it's coincidental that like all of the so many people are changing how they look after having spent so much time online. And I just think we have to be really careful about it, or we'll start to flip-flop what's real and what's not real.
mm,
Um, and I mean, deep fakes are a thing. Like you can spend time online digesting so much fakery, and if that becomes your sense of reality, like then that's just scary. And I think to me, on the connection side, one of the things I think that is hurting us on our connectivity naturally is we spend so much time on our devices only connecting virtually and that we almost forgotten how to connect in real life. And you can see it when you go to public spaces like airports. And I was in a lounge the other day and I'm looking around the lounge and every single person was on a device. I mean, from 2-year-olds to 85-year-olds. No one is talking. And so there's that's creating a social cost to that for us. And I do think it destroys a little bit of the fabric of our society because we spend so much time, and algorithms are algorithms for a reason. Like you get sucked in because they're designed to suck you in, and they suck us into our pockets of ideology. And those pockets of ideology also, work on some of our reptilian nature. And so I think we get more cynical, we
mm,
feel more fear. We,
mm.
it's called doom scrolling for a reason. So I think we just have to really make sure um that we see it like a drug because I think it really is like a drug on our brains.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it is such a
So
big part
tricky.
of our world culture. But like so many things that us humans have invented, we kind of realize in hindsight, but that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah.
Like so
I think
many
about it,
things.
I know. I'm like, I would think about it kind of like sugar. Like sugar,
Mm.
sugar can be nice in little doses. But if you start to have it for a long time, it jacks with your internal system.
As your main meal, right? Yeah, yeah,
Right? And you
yeah.
and like you become diabetic, you have these issues, these actual metabolic issues that
Mm.
happen from overindulging. And I think there's an analogy there that we
Mm.
can pull from.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'm on my way out.
Yeah, I know. I know. Art.
Do you think, as you also mentioned, loneliness as a situation we create? Do you think
Mhm.
that and the social media epidemic, yeah, is part of that? And what are some of the tools that we can use to overcome loneliness?
Yeah, I think that there is no coincidence to the fact that if you line the pieces up of we had the pandemic, so we all went online, and then we've had these spikes of like across the world,
Mm,
loneliness, isolation, depression, anxiety. I think you can draw a very real correlation, and the time went somewhere. It went to online things,
mm,
and I think, the work that Jonathan Haidt has done on understanding social media, if you haven't seen it, he's
no,
got a really great book called The Anxious Generation,
uh-huh,
which is like sort of the scientific, now we can do longitudinal studies of kids who were born in the 80s without these devices versus kids today, and what's happening with them. And we're creating anxiety. And he makes it broader than social media. It's about technology, but I think there's some very important lessons to learn from that. And coming back to your question though around loneliness and like what are some tools we can do? I think the thing about and I think the hard part about technology and social media is a big piece of this is it's so attractive. It's so enjoyable. It's like, and it's designed to like hit that dopamine, in your brain. And so when you go off of it, you don't naturally just think, oh, well, now I'm just going to go connect with another person. You're like, what do I do with my itchy self? I don't know what to do with myself. I'm like, now I've got this like hole, and put us in a situation like I was talking about at the airport where it's busy and everybody's rushing, and it's not like necessarily a natural place for us to slow down and connect. It's very, easy for us to just fill that time with the phone. But what I think we have to realize is that like those little things become habits that take over the daily rhythms of our life. And so then where do we create the space to talk to strangers, to meet people, to engage? And it's like anything else. If you get out of practice of it, it gets really uncomfortable. It gets really weird to do it. So I think that's a part of what has been like a perpetual thing in spending less time together and spending less time connecting is it feels harder to do it when you start to try, because you feel a little awkward because we're people and we feel awkward when we don't know what to say, and I don't know what to small talk, so what do? We just go to the thing that makes us feel comfortable again. And so I think, there are little things I would say that we can do that have to be intentional. Like when you go to the grocery store, don't just be in such a rush to get through the line. Take a moment to connect with the cashier who's spending their life hours in that job. Have a conversation. It can be a 3-minute conversation, but the little bits of meaning in our interactions make us feel like so much better. And like how you can make someone's day by doing something very small. And I think we just have to remember that and practice it. And I think just little things go a long way.
mm,
Smiling at someone can make a difference.
yes,
Uh,
yeah,
so I don't think we should underestimate that. And we can, there's big connection, there's little connection. We're talking about little moments of connection, but that build towards more meaningful opportunities for it.
yeah. Do you live in a city or a smaller place, town?
I I am a nomad, so I
Ah,
live all over the place.
okay.
So sometimes I am in large cities and sometimes
Mm.
I am in very small towns or nature.
We moved from Sydney to the mid north coast, New South Wales, which is about 6 hours north of Sydney,
Mm.
to have have a change of pace of life, and we're in a small country town now. And one of the things that we were really surprised about when we first moved here was that connection, right? In the city, it's like face down, everyone's in a rush. And then here, that we're like, people just say hello to you in the street. It's such a different, it's just such a different way of living. And when you go back to the city after you've had that experience, it just feels really, really native. Have
Mhm.
you had any similar experiences?
Absolutely. And I think, what you're saying, which I think is something that we need to reflect on, especially if we're struggling with some of these things like loneliness or isolation, is what is the environment that you're in? Because our environment can help support us, or it can help break us down. And that is something we control. And I think we forget we control it. Now, not everybody has the choice to just pick up and move. And I don't mean to say that that everyone does. But what I would say is, like, there are little things we can control. And so, well, I was having a conversation the other day with someone who was like, I'm living in a city and I'm feeling all this anxiety. I was like, when's the last time you went for a walk at the park?
Mm,
And they were like, oh gosh, it's probably been 6 months. And I'm like, yeah, that's something you should probably put into your environment. And there is something about spaciousness that creates spaciousness. So I don't think it's coincidental that you're in a smaller coastal town. There's probably literally more space to people,
mm,
and we probably create more space for each other. And so just noticing those things. But I would say I am a proponent of, like, if you have the ability to, and the privilege of changing your environment, and you're in an environment that is not serving you, don't be afraid to do it. And I think sometimes we get so stuck in the patterns, or we're so stuck to the certainty of, like, well, but I know what this is, or I know
mm,
this experience, or I've been living on this block for 15 years. But this is a part of, I think, being being in the making, is like, continue to look at the things, like, we're creators in our life. Are the things that you have around you creating the kind of life that you want and helping you be the kind of person that you want? And if they aren't, don't be afraid to challenge it. Don't be afraid to change it up a little bit. Try something different. And for me, I think one of the biggest things, well, I mean, we made a huge shift during the pandemic. We were living in LA, and we were those people that got an RV and did, like, national parks during that time. And there weren't so many people out. But what was incredible, though, moving from city, which was in, like, hardcore lockdown,
mm.
everybody was super, super isolated, to, now we're like RVing through Arizona, and people are at the campsite having a party. So your environment totally changes what we see as being okay and not okay, and it can help us break down some of those barriers that we've learned to put up. And I think it's refreshing when you step into a different current of energy, like you're talking about, like feeling how other people might live.
Yeah, it definitely makes you realize the importance of those things, the connection and the lack of, so much access to so many things. I think can feel it when you go back into a city, like, well, that you can feel the how anonymous you feel, but also like how you could easily get sucked back in, just like you do with social
Yeah.
media, sucked back into, big flashy lights and shopping and all of those things that really aren't very relevant to meaning in our
Being.
lives.
It's so true. And it's so easy, I think, to get swept up in it. But one of
Mm,
the things, Nadine, I think that perpetuates that, I talked a little bit about productive society thinking, and I think that that's a very Western kind of, like, how productive are you being with your time? Um, and but I also think, like, we get very about us in those environments because
Mm,
you have to fight traffic, you have to fight for your space. There's like more competition naturally in that kind of a dynamic, whether it's intentional or non-intentional. It's just kind of in the energy. And so it becomes very much about me. Like, okay, well, I have an hour to get across town and I've got to get the subway. And so you're pushing your way through things or whatever it is. So we just lose some of the consideration we might have for another human because we feel like that trigger of, well, I have to take care of myself. And I think
mm.
that's just some of the environmental, like, that's how it operates. It's very efficient, but it's not always super relevant for meaning.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm just looking through my notes. I'm aware that we're kind of talking about the book without talking about the book at the moment, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
So let's talk about the book. Now, you
Okay.
talk about mind, body, and heart,
Yes.
but the thing that we don't talk about very much, as you've asserted, is the human spirit. And this
Yeah.
is the innate self,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Which is what the title of the book. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between that, like the human spirit? You've
Mhm.
obviously touched on it in all of the things that you've been saying, but
Mhm.
yeah, just how you
Yeah.
differentiate between those things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an important question because I think it all works together we are holistic beings and these pieces are like your emotions are not disconnected from your body, but there's a distinction there. Between your emotions and your body. And same with emotions and your thoughts, right? Like they're two different things, but they're highly interconnected and they
Mm,
run all through your body. And I think the thing that I have noticed, and speaking more from like a personal development lens and a social construct perspective, is we talk about ourselves as though we are those three parts. Your thoughts that you have, and that shows up in the language that we have. And then we have our emotions, and that shows up in our feelings, and then we are our bodies, and that shows up like in action. But we haven't brought into the personal development space the conversation about spirit. That seems to be mostly relegated to like more spiritual or religious
mm,
moments, and that's beautiful. But I think we're missing something in the personal development space because our spiritual piece of ourselves, which I call it the innate self because it's innate in everybody. Everybody has this piece of you that is and it has some characteristics so we can recognize it. But it's just stands for the higher nature. Your capital N, right? Higher nature, and it has 8 characteristics. So it's also a nice little double entendre. But I think like we you can see it. It's very intuitive when you start to talk about it. It's like things like character. Character lives outside of your mind and your emotions and your thoughts. It is something you are in being. It is who you show up to be in your life. It's the values you have with the integrity that you want with, it's like who's your character when you go through tough times. And then contribution, like how do you want to contribute your skills and your gifts, and that's a really important characteristic of our innate being. And so there connection's a key one that we have been talking a lot about. And I spent probably the most time in the book talking about that one because I think it's so relevant for the moment we're in. But there, like the thing I would say is that this piece to me is a piece of a missing puzzle in the personal development space
mm,
around, you will not fully understand yourself if you just think about the feelings that you have and unpacking, what makes you feel that way with the thoughts you have, with where it sits in your body and sort of somatic work. And we have frameworks for that, but we haven't had, and then so what does it mean in your life? And that's the innate self piece. And it does have 8 characteristics to try to make it more tangible into like, how do I understand this? And to give some framework for it. So that's the premise of the book.
cool. You've mentioned, and it's in the title, the 8 characteristics.
Yeah.
Can you take us through what they are and maybe pick out one or two of your favorites? Like we've obviously mentioned character.
Yep.
Is values one?
Yeah. Yeah, character is the first one.
Yep.
And we've talked about a little bit contribution and connection.
Contribution. Yep.
Yeah, the one I'll talk about that we haven't talked about at all yet is creativity.
Um,
And and I'd love to talk about creativity because it's a fun one.
yeah.
I think creativity is one of those things that's so interesting though. And I'll tell this in terms of a story of like I was doing a workshop and we were the point of the workshop was basically to help people understand where they were in terms of their like career trajectory, like where are you at and are you happy with where you're at, etc. So we asked them to do an exercise on, or I asked them to do an exercise on dreaming. And I have these like 55-year-old guys who are like fairly successful in their life. And after the workshop's over, I had one guy come up to me and he was like, I really hated that part about dreaming. It just felt so childish. Like, I don't know what you wanted us to do there. And I was like, well, what were your dreams? So I'm looking at what he wrote down. He was like, I want to lose 10 pounds. I was like, dude, that is not a dream. That is a goal. And those are different things. And so like I was like, what's a dream? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh wow, we're so out of touch with our like imagination and
Mm,
our creativity. And so what I part of the reason I love this one is because if you are the type of person that says I'm not creative, this section's for you because a lot of us have limited the definition of creativity in our minds to be like the definition of what it means to be an artist.
mm,
And an artist is just one type of a creative, but there are multiple different muscles of creativity. And one is a functional creative. And functional creatives are people like engineers who are like designing the world to work. Still very creative in nature. You're literally designing how we operate in this life, and that's incredibly creative. And then we have like cognitive creatives, and these are the people who are idea people. They come up with theories and hypotheses, and so you fall somewhere in the spectrum of creativity. You just may not know how to recognize it. And so I love that one because I think it's the one that kind of reconnects us to the spark, the joy, and that childlike wonder piece that we maybe have forgotten, but we had somewhere along the journey. And so how can we, get back in touch with that piece of us?
yeah, right. And yeah, it's interesting that you said with that particular person that they said felt so childish, and you're like, that's the point. I think that's a good like just to yeah use our imaginations and allow ourselves to play. And I think probably even from a physical perspective, like you can get into your creative flow by being more playful, right?
1,000%. And I just think, to me, creativity is sort of the spice. It's the spice of life. It's a little bit of like, and what I found though is so often we don't embrace creativity because we automatically bring all of our mental models to it. We're like, I have to be perfect at this,
Mm.
and I don't know what the value of this is. We get so in our heads when it comes to creativity, and we judge it, and we feel about it. And if we go back to what you just said, which is like, how do you embrace it as an exercise of playfulness? What could it open up for you? And I just dare you to do something creative and see if you don't feel better afterwards. It's just like it just releases some endorphins, and it's where we can feel that flow state where you just kind of lose sense of time. And if we allow ourselves to do it without judgment and assessment and all those other things we tend to bring to the table as adults.
What do you do? What's your personal go-to for creativity? Writing?
Yeah. Well, so writing is actually no, it's not my playful one. I'm like so serious about like, how is this? Oh, it's work, but it's work I enjoy. But for me it's painting. I
Okay.
love to paint. I love to paint, but it was funny. I brought in an artist to a leadership offsite I just had recently. It was such a great opportunity, and he was telling me we were doing a painting exercise where we were all painting a piece of a puzzle that they all fitted together. It was a part of our values exercise, and he said, why did you grab the littlest tiniest brush?" And I was like, "Well, I always paint with the little tiniest brush." And he goes, "Then I can tell you right now, you're afraid of making mistakes." And I was like, you know. He said you always go for the biggest brush. The biggest brush is it's easiest to later come in and make refinements, but start big. And it felt like life truism, like a little bit of wisdom in
Mm,
how to think through what it is to engage with this part. Go for it, dream, like go for the thing. And that what's the saying? Like shoot for the moon and you land at the stars, or vice versa that. But it's a little bit of that, of like if we allow ourselves to pick up the big brush, what might we be able to create in the making, and don't overly perfection it. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
that's my
I like that. I like that. The idea of like go big picture and then figuring out the
get it.
details.
Yeah,
That
for
might not
sure.
sit very well with some people, especially
For
my
sure.
husband. He gets analysis paralysis. I'm like, let's just do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
interesting.
true. So true. Yeah.
uh, okay, let me have a look. So, let's talk a little bit about contribution because I think that when we say contribution, we think it needs to be big,
Mm,
and for women, especially if they're parenting,
mm,
homemaking, that can feel almost irrelevant.
mhm, mhm.
So how does that become more relevant to people, to everyone?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so I just shout out to the moms, because I'm a
Mm,
mom, and I'm a working mom, and I have realized how beautiful of a thing it is for women who want to stay home and full time do that, because it is nothing but pure contribution. I mean, you were just pouring yourself into that little person, and bless you for doing it. But I think, you raise a great question around the size of the thing, the size of impact, the size of scale. So two characteristics that are part of our higher nature, our innate self, are contribution and generosity. And I think we sometimes conflate those two things. And let me tell you my definition difference between contribution is really about you. It's what are the things you have to offer? What are your skills? What are your thoughts? How do you want to pour into the lives of others? And that can be in little tiny ways. That can be in big ways. But I think we should not discount the importance of the little ways, because it is also felt as generosity. So the other piece of our innate nature is generosity, and generosity is actually about you. It's I'm giving of myself in order to pour into you. And when we think of generosity, sometimes people associate it just financially,
mm,
but I would say it's much broader than that. Like generosity of spirit is a generosity of actions, of time, of kindness. And so these things in little moments sometimes could get linked up of, I am contributing, or I want to contribute in this way. And so I'm going to do these little things. And what that feels like to the person receiving it is moments of generosity. And I think there's something really powerful about recognizing you can contribute. Let's go back to the lady at the grocery store. It's like by you, let's say that you pause for a moment and have a conversation with her about something that you learned today. And which we would never do that. I mean, we rarely ever take that time to have a kind of moment like that. But you may actually contribute some perspective to her in her life, or contribute some hope. And that's so meaningful. And so I think, like, as you think about contribution, it's really what do you have to give? Is it your kindness? Is it your skills? Is it your thoughts? And don't discount it just because you think it's not like the big meta, impact that you want to do. These little bits build on themselves. And yeah, and I think that's important. One of the other innate characteristics of ourselves is meaning. And I talk about micro meaning versus macro meaning. And micro meaning is that we are meaning makers. So let's start there. We make meaning out of everything.
mm.
Like the smile on your face, I make meaning out of it. The fact that you don't smile back at me, I make meaning out of that. I send you a text, you don't immediately respond, I'm making meaning out of that. We make meaning out of everything. And we interpret situations, and that's micro meaning. Those little moments of like, how do I read the subtext of this conversation or the tone? Micro meaning. Macro meaning is, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of my life? How am I living? Am I happy with who I am? Or, all of the big questions. And the same can be true for contribution. You can have little bits of
Mm,
contribution, you can have big, but it all matters. And it's all meaningful. And so don't give yourself that permission, to have just little bits of contribution. And these to me, these are the moments that lighten up our life, that make us feel brighter and happier and more connected, even if they're small.
mm. Yeah, great. Your book. We're getting to the book. This is all in the book.
It's all in the book.
It's all in the book, people. What made you decide to put all of this into a book? Was it your contribution?
Yeah, good question. So okay, I'll talk about me, but before I talk about me, I want to talk about what I felt and in terms of others.
Mm,
I mentioned before I'd worked in academia, nonprofits. I'd worked across people with, from 50 different countries. And I think the thing I felt, or I was really seeing as I was working in the coaching space, is we do not have a framework to talk about this important part of ourselves. And
right.
we've got to get it out of like a belief system conversation. Not that those
Mm,
aren't beautiful conversations to have, but it's a barrier of entry for some people. Like some people don't engage with their spiritual part because they don't know what their belief system is. And that's not the way in. Like, don't start by expecting you to know all of the beliefs that you have to engage with the being that you are. Like, start with the being piece, and that's the personal development piece. And then it can grow into something else. But I just felt like, I just felt like there was really something missing there that I felt very compelled to try to create a way forward on. On a personal level, um, yeah, I am at a point in my life. You talked about earlier midlife. I am in midlife. Thank you. And I'm like, am I contributing what I have to give? And am I doing it in such a way that I think adventure is one of my core values. And so I do these exercises with myself where I'm like, fast forward to 80 and I'm standing, and I'm like standing on a stage. What am I most proud of? How have I spent my life? Like, what am I telling younger people to do? So I have these kind of like check-in moments. And one of my big bucket list items has been to write a book, and that's more heady. It was like something I've always wanted to do. I was an English nerd in college, and but I had never found the thing I wanted to say so much that I would memorialize it forever because your name's attached to this thing forever. And I didn't want to just write some book. I wanted to write something I really cared about. And so for me, this was a big, I had a milestone year this year, personally, and everything came together where it was like, this is the time. On a personal, just like aside, when I was writing the book, I was about 75% done with it. And I'd hit like this, I don't know what to go, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know if I'm in editing phase, and I started to get woken up at 4 a.m., like just a wake up call where it was the get up and finish the book.
mm.
And it was happening to me, Nadine, every day. So, I'll call that a calling, but it literally was like an alarm clock. So I'll give it that language, but it's a part of why I did it. It was like personal milestone meets something I felt like was needed in the world with something I felt like I needed to give. And I've had a very privileged life in a lot of ways. And so how am I using that access and that, some of the goodness in my own life to try to give back.
Yeah, amazing. Who's it for?
Yeah,
Anyone.
so funny.
Everyone.
So I got asked this the other day, and
But when you were
the
writing it, did you have someone in mind, or were you, I think when we do whatever work we do, we think of it, we create things with us in mind, right? What would I like?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my elevator pitch is I wrote it for people who are seeking. Like
Mm,
the people who are looking for it is who I wrote it for. And then practically speaking, I had two like people in my mind. One who I think has one of my friends has grown up at and has intuitively a lot of these things very front and center, but doesn't have any framework.
Mm,
And so when we start to talk about like what you care about or how are you giving back, like we will get stuck in these cyclical conversations of like, I don't know how to think about it, I don't know. And so it was like the lack of the
mm,
framework thing. And then I have another friend who was a deeply religious person and has gone through a lot of hard things in life and now is not sure where they sit in their sort of has kind of lost faith in life, I'll call it, and needs the boost,
mm.
the energy, the spiritual reminder. And without necessarily all of the ideology, again, like I think there's such a place for that. I just don't think it has to be the entry point. And and I think sometimes we have to rethink or re not think it's an ontological thing. We need to re-sit with that piece and there needs to be some discovery. So I also wrote it for with him in mind of like just be reminded, of the light that is within you, of the goodness. um and that's how I think about it. It's just the light that we all have.
Yeah, yeah. If someone or when someone is reading the book, how would you recommend they approach it? Like, read the whole thing, then read it again, and journal or put things into practice, because it can be very easy to kind of acknowledge these parts of us, or read a book and understand from a logical sense of view that, yeah, that makes sense. But how do we
Mhm.
start to integrate those things from your book
Mhm.
into our lives?
Mhm. Yeah. So, I would say, so I wrote it in micro chapters and that was kind of a grand experiment. But I think we handle having little snippets to think about at a time better than, let me unpack my whole self right now really quickly in this chapter. And with that, I tried to pepper in some thoughtful questions so that it would create some natural reflection. And I would say, like, definitely grab a journal. And one of the things I will, one of these days, finish is a workbook that I'm
Mm.
building out to help guide through the book. It's on my to-do list, but
You'll be
I
getting those
think
4 a.m. calls soon.
so. I think that yes, if the ideal way is take a bit at a time, and I
Mhm.
think the places that you feel most challenged or you're like, oh, I've not thought about the slow down in those spaces. And the places where you're like, yep, I got this, you can just fly right through
Mm.
those micro
Okay.
chapters. You may not need it as much. And I did a couple of quizzes in the book to help almost like a tool of diagnostic tool of like where should I spend some time. And so at the back of the book, you can actually take a quiz on which of my innate characteristics might need more love. Is it my sense of contribution, my sense of creativity? And that can also help be a guide on, oh, I maybe should spend more time thinking about this. Character's a really rich one. I think we can spend more like headspace time there, whereas generosity may be more emotional space. So I think it's also about like where are you in your journey
Yeah.
and what resonates with you most or challenges you most, and then where do you feel the most energy and drawn to, and spend the time there.
Yeah. Cool. Great tips. Where can we get your book? We're going to put all of the links in the guest directory, so we'll have your profile in the guest directory with all of your links there. But for people who are for seekers
Yes. Yes.
who want to seek out your book,
Yes. So you can find me on Amazon. That's
yeah.
the best place to find me globally. And the book is just called The Innate Self. It's innate, like the number and the letter. I also have a website, innateself.com,
Okay, cool.
and I am on Instagram if you are a social media person. I know. I don't promise to post a
I
lot, but
don't
I do
check
post
that. I
some.
don't check it though.
But Innate Coach, you can find me
Okay,
there too.
cool.
Yeah.
Great. Brilliant. Jules, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really insightful conversation. I wish you all the best of luck with getting this book out there. And yeah, Thank you for your
Thank you so
inspiration.
much, Nadine. I really appreciate this conversation and yeah, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.